Hello again, and welcome to another episode of the Bitcoin News Show. I am, of course, your host, Vortex. We are, of course, here on the World Crypto Network YouTube channel, talking again about Bitcoin. We got some awesome panelists tonight. We're going to be excited to be talking to them all. We got a great show. We got a lot of good topics, and we got another special guest on here this evening tonight. We got Paul Sztorc on, and really glad to have him on here to talk about the stuff that he's going to be doing. I'd like to introduce the panelists before we get into the news. So first, Paul, thanks for joining us, man. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. And of course, we got again Gabriel D. Vine. How you doing, man?
Great to be here. Thanks for having me. Hello, everyone.
Hello, internet. Hello, prosperity, I believe is the catchphrase.
Half the time prosperity and half the time posterity, because they could be watching it in 26 years for all we know.
Very good. And then we got joining us every once in a while again, we got Daniel from You and Me BTC. How you doing, man?
Hey, pretty good. It has been a very long time, but I'm glad to be back. And yeah, these topics are some things that I haven't kept up with as much as I should. Been super busy, so it'll be fun. I'll learn a lot.
Awesome. There's no excuse. There's no excuse on the Bitcoin News Show. Now Daniel is, I'm sure he's going to do fine. We are all embedded into the Bitcoin space quite heavily, I believe. So we'll be more than happy to share information with you, the audience out there tonight. So before we get into it, I'd just like to give you guys a bit of a rundown what we're going to do. I'm actually going to ask Paul a couple of questions about what he's doing, and then I'd like to get right into the news. So first, Paul, thanks again, man. I really appreciate you joining us. I know everybody's, we're all busy these days, just working these 40, 80-hour work weeks as the banks collapse around us. we gotta do what we can to survive. And I've been following you for a little while, and I find a couple of your projects very interesting, and I'm really excited to hear how they're coming along and where they are now. So let me ask you, Paul, first before we get into that, just a little quick history. How did you first get into Bitcoin?
So I'm in the group. So I heard about it a long time ago on like a libertarian mailing list, and I, of course, like almost everyone else. The first time I heard about it, I thought it's like the stupidest idea. Like it was so embarrassing. And I think it was like the Pork Fest, or like it was like some New Hampshire thing where it was like someone was giving away, like if you attend, they'll give out some Bitcoins, and then it was like, what is a Bitcoin? Blah blah blah. And I later found out that those were Roger Vere's Bitcoins. He volunteered to give those away. That was like 2011 or something. And I was like, why would anyone want, don't these people know anything about money? It's all about the network effect. Of course, people are not going to switch to like some stupid other database of like, what, and my actual thought was something like, why would anyone use fake money or something like that, which is a very common thought that people have when they're first getting into Bitcoin. And then what really broke it for me was was it Wired or something about the Silk Road? It was the Silk Road journalism piece. So it was not Chuck Schumer. Chuck Schumer did it for a lot of people, is my understanding. But for me, it was this piece of journalism about Silk Road, and I'm not particularly interested in illegal drugs at all. I'm not a supporter of the drug war, of course. But I know that someone who's using highly addictive, highly illegal drugs, I know that if they have a way of getting them for free, they would do it, right? Like there's a lot of like pressure there. People will do a lot of things to like get money. They'll steal or whatever it takes to get the fix. And so I knew just like I had only read like the first half or the first third of the piece, but I kind of knew it was legit just reading the piece, because I was like, there's no possible way that, if there was a way to cheat this system and get like free drugs out of it, that would happen, right? That's not something that would happen in the universe where you would just like, there would be some vulnerability that wasn't exploited by desperate people. And so I was like, of course they can't. And I was like, why don't they use a credit card? And I was like, oh, of course, because I'd never thought about it before, right? And you just think, the credit card has your name and your address and all that. And you kind of didn't never think about that before Bitcoin, but that's how I got into Bitcoin. And then of course, like I kind of knew, I did obviously a lot of reading after that, but it was that article and that awareness that there's no possible way that this could work on something like Silk Road, unless it was like a legit internet cash, which would definitely be something different and something that a lot of people would need to use. And yet, now they would need to use it for this, but yet you could use it for anything that was not an illicit transaction. So it was kind of this, Nassim Taleb wrote a piece about intolerant minorities, but not in the way you might think. Anyway, it's a wonderful piece of writing, but I kind of reached a similar conclusion to him, that here's this currency that works in both the dark market and the light markets. And it kind of all just happened at that one moment in 2012. So that's kind of a long answer, but I think that's really the right answer, really. Like, a lot of people kind of got into it earlier and you don't know how or why, but this is like the first truly unalterable piece of logic that enters, and it's like a game changer. Something like Silk Road really opened my mind and opened my eyes to what Bitcoin was.
Yeah, I have to agree. I mean, I think a lot of people got in from the various Silk Road articles. I think the one that intrigued me was Gawker. I think that was the one that got me into it. And it's crazy. People don't even realize, how, because we're so used to it now, we don't even realize that there is now a corporation in between every single payment that you make. There is now a large corporation, and I mean every single transaction that you make, short of tipping some the valet driver, right? So
Bitcoin has made
pretty
me
crazy.
Bitcoin has made me into a very different person. I remember when I first purchased Bitcoin using BitInstant, you had to like go into CVS and use like the red phone to like send them, and they would ask you all these very invasive questions about like your social security number and your address, and you're like, do I need to give all this out? Because you had never thought about payments before, or at least I hadn't given it a second thought. I just thought, as soon as I turned 16 or something, I got a checking account, because I was like, why would I want to hold all this cash around? It's more fun to have it online. I can sign in, I can watch it accumulate interest. I'd never given any of this stuff a second thought. I got a credit card very early, before they grandfathered in those rules about 18-year-olds being unable to, I was just old enough to like get one in time, and then to start building my credit history, because I thought that was like really important, which it is, but like I just had never. So Bitcoin really changed me a lot, and I don't know, I hope it's for the better, but it certainly made me a lot more aware of obscure details in payments that I was not aware of before. So that's something, I guess. But also more like how, I mean, money is so important to everyone's lives. And there's just a lot of stuff about payments that I just never thought about. And you're right, it is bizarre that there is a company that knows basically everything about me. It knows what I like to eat. It knows where I like to shop. It knows what I like to buy. It knows where I live. It knows where I work. It knows everything about me. And that's kind of bizarre.
It is. It really is. Now there's a difference between that and then, for example, the future where you walk into a room and everything plays your favorite music and all that kind of stuff. That's the idea, was to have that like privately encrypted locally in your own information, right? Not broadcasted out to Facebook and Google and to all of these big corporations. So hopefully, that tide is going to turn. And speaking of Silk Road, it's just, I think there's a lot of people that completely misunderstood or didn't quite understand fully the impact that really had for a proven use case scenario for Bitcoin. I mean, it was at scale. We're talking global. We're talking billions of dollars. According to one actual report, I believe that they tried to study by scraping all the information. And I mean, this is a multi-billion-dollar marketplace. It was working perfectly. Most of the reviews were actually 4 or 5 stars. Actually, it said most of the reviews were 5 stars. Because if you got 1-star rating below, then bam, it's just like eBay. They're going to go to your competitor. So it was an incredibly efficient system that really kept a lot of crime off the street. So it was a beautiful, I think, use case scenario for Bitcoin, just to showcase how really it allows you to make the payments they say you can't make, right? It's not quite really about being able to make every single transaction, every single coffee transaction on the blockchain, right? It's a part of it is definitely making the payment they say that you can't make. So really interesting that Bitcoin allows us to do that. So that's really great. Really great to hear, Paul, that your entrance was similar to mine into Bitcoin. So that's very cool. I'd like to go into a little bit just quickly about briefly about what you're doing now, Paul, in Bitcoin. And I've seen things like Hivemind and Truthcoin, and now even Block, which I believe is an API, I think, for accessing Bitcoin data. So really interesting stuff, and I'd like you to maybe go into it, whatever you want to talk about first.
Yeah, well, first of all, I work for Jeff Garzick's startup, Block, BLOQ. So that's what I do there, and I mostly am doing what I did before I worked anywhere. I'm just now affiliated, and I get to use a lot of the resources there, which is great. But I mean, I'm doing like so many things, I cannot even kind of keep track of them, and it's actually overwhelming. A lot of times there's so much stuff you want to do, and there's stuff you want to learn so that you can go down like some path and do something else later, and there's just so much stuff you'd want to like have other people. Some people email me and they ask, if they can help or something, and you want to have like a big team, but just explaining something to someone is like, you'd want to put it in. I'm kind of a perfectionist a little bit in some ways, not in all ways, but just like, like I want to go over a piece of writing until it's good. So I don't want to like explain something unless I think I've explained it as well as I can or something. And there's just so much stuff I want to do. But yeah, my big thing is that I've been working on this Hivemind project that I invented since before I had a Bitcoin job. And Hivemind is a really cool project. It does some, I mean, it has very high, it's a really high like risk reward kind of thing, right? So it's like, it tries to do a lot of crazy stuff, and there's a lot of risk associated with that. But I've tried to minimize that risk. But in return, it does some really amazing things. It lets people use Bitcoin in lots of different ways, and lets them transform their bearer asset into other bearer assets. And basically, it unlocks this entire world of markets and finance. But even more important than that, it unlocks this kind of broadcast medium of the prediction market. And there's just so much to say about that, but it's like I've been a huge fan of prediction markets since long before I heard about Bitcoin, and there's just tons to say about that. But Hivemind was going to be a Bitcoin sidechain, and it still is, of course. And so I did a lot of work on Hivemind, and then I reached a point where I'd gone too far on Hivemind, where it was like, it was making too much progress. So I needed to now work on the sidechain part. And unfortunately, I don't think a lot of people were working on it at that time, which was later in 2015. So I set out to design the two-way peg. Blockstream and the people who wrote that paper, the pre-Blockstream paper of October 2014 about sidechains, they did not really specify a specific design or a specific kind of recipe or a total package. There was a lot of great ideas in there, and I selected many of those ideas, but that's sort of like, that's kind of like a supermarket, whereas I had to like build like a recipe or something. So I had to say, okay, we take this idea and then you heat it to 300 degrees and then you add this other idea or whatever. And so I had to do that. And now I've been spending a lot of this year, specifically the last 6 or 8 months, working with someone to actually build all the software, as well as address all the objections. So you might have seen I tried to post some writing and some videos about what the risks are and what I think and how safe I think sidechains are. And in particular, I think they're relatively safe compared to a lot of other stuff that people want to try. But I think that's not good enough, right? We should set a really high bar of like perfect safety. And I don't have a problem with that at all. I think that's totally fair for people in Bitcoin to demand that the contract that they had in mind when they bought is the same one that that we preserve. And I think if we don't do that, I'm not sure really what Bitcoin is if we don't try something like that, if we don't aim for that kind of bar. So I've been working really hard on that, and in particular, I think that the sidechains concept is, I really want to stress test it out. So now this latest thing that I'm very recently embarked upon is that we might be able to have a scaling sidechain, which is basically everything that Bitcoin has, but just with like a larger block size, soft fork style. And I have one reason for for kind of going for this is that I think it's really like it's kind of what you might call like a worst case scenario. It's not really the best phrase for it, but it's sort of like this is kind of the maximum stress. Like this would be the most unpopular side chain, so it would be most at odds with this kind of promise of perfect safety. And so I try to aim for that, because I think if we can clear that bar, then we just like cut out a whole class of problems. Because right now we have a lot of problems in Bitcoin, and I think a lot of those are just incentive or interpersonal, or they are just people with different views. And I think it would be great if all those people could just work on their own stuff, and we wouldn't have to bother each other. Right now, it basically requires anyone who wants to work on the protocol to be fully up to date on everything and an expert in everything, and to be comparably intelligent to each other, which is like excludes like everyone except for like, you know, like whatever it is, like 40 people max, like maybe even like 10 people if you really think about it. And so it's like impossible. How can you get anything done if that's the stakes? I think it would be nice if we had something that just let people try their own stuff. I try to use a metaphor or an example of something like, you know, it's like JavaScript or something in your browser. Like like a lot of people just hate XYZ, and if you don't want it, you don't have to have it. You don't have to run it on your computer. It's like any other application.
Hey, Paul.
That's kind of the vision. Yes.
Paul, can you describe or define what exactly you mean by scaling sidechain?
It would just be a sidechain that's pegged to Bitcoin, so use the same 21 million coins, but it would otherwise be exactly the same, but for the fact that the block size is higher. So that's like the one thing that people want, and the one thing that people are worried about. And so I think it's a desirable goal for that reason, which is that there would be interest in people using it, presumably, and it would also be presumably it would be like maximally unsafe. So if we can see that the maximally unsafe thing is acceptable, then it kind of makes it easier to clear the whole.
How do you have that seems almost maybe a bit of a contradiction to me. Like, how do you have a side chain that uses the same token but has a different Coinbase reward, or a different mining reward? Would it happen less often or something? Or how could you change the issuance model on a sidechain?
The sidechains only get paid in transaction fees, and so to compensate for that, that would be a horrible problem, because the transaction fees are linked to the security, and in fact the security is also linked to the transaction fees, because no one wants to use a chain that's insecure. So you have this horrible correlation spiral where if people even assume that the chain might become unpopular in the future, they might stop transacting today, and then it would be a self-fulfilling prophecy of just destruction. So in order to counter that, in the design, this is what I was talking about with the recipe. So I call for all of the side chains to be merge mined, which lets them all use the same miners kind of for free. And there are other challenges associated with that, which I try to address, but that's the logic that got me to merge mine sidechain is that requirement, because you cannot exceed the global 21 million coin limit. But what would happen is that you'd pay a transaction fee on regular Bitcoin Core main chain to move the coins to the sidechain, and then over there you'd be paying transaction fees, which would presumably be lower per kilobyte. And then if you wanted to, you'd again, on the sidechain, you'd be paid the same transaction fee you paid before, but you'd destroy the coin over there and it would reappear on the main chain. So it's basically traveling back and forth. You can imagine like maybe some islands with like Bitcoin Core is kind of like in the middle, and it's got like a little flag with like a star. It's like the capital, and then there are all these islands, and then you could just fly in a plane and visit the other island, and then fly back, and then you're kind of in a new place. So the scaling sidechain is just a complete copy of the current island, but it's just bigger, and so it has a lot of strengths and weaknesses. But there are some cool features of sidechains that I think make the weak. So even if there weren't cool feature, even if there weren't like synergy, right? I think it would still be desirable to let people do their own thing and say, okay, we don't care if there's only a few nodes, and we don't care if those nodes are all run by Coinbase, and that Coinbase has KYC and they force us to give a passport or whatever. You know, I don't think it. If the alternative is we lose those users completely, and they get crowded out, I don't see how that makes it any worse for the people who are on the main chain, right? So you could say it's bad or it's good or it's whatever, but I don't think it's any. Well, I'm just trying to keep a very tight focus on how could this possibly be bad for the people who are using Bitcoin the way it is today. And I've been trying very carefully to, you know, like make sure I don't miss anything, but I'm slowly kind of eliminating a lot of the territory there, and that's my goal, is to eliminate all of it. And so that's the idea.
I just like to point out that I'm getting kind of tired tonight, and that I was definitely getting a little bit mixed up in my question there. So, but you definitely answered my real concern. So, thank you.
Okay, good.
I have a practical question about how you're running the side chain and pegging. Are you also sharing public and private keys so that it's a 1-to-1 correlation? This address has this many Bitcoins and this many sidechain coins? Or if I move from one chain to another, am I sending coins to a different address on the other chain?
Different address. So as if you're sending them to yourself on Bitcoin, but with different keys each time, because you never reuse keys, of course. So yeah, so it's completely different. You just say you're sending them from like 14HJ or something to like, you know, 18QR or something, and you can't even really tell, because of course they're just a hash of a public key, so they're all just like uninterpretable gibberish. But yeah, you do not share the keys.
All right.
Very cool. So then let me ask you. So Paul, there's no actual like API stack or anything like that for sidechains, is what you're saying? Because there is various APIs for Bitcoin to do things like, you know, send transactions and basic things, but there's no sidechain API, so to speak.
Well, I mean, what do you mean by API? Like, of course, there's no like server, if that's what you're asking. I mean, we're working on the software that has like different command line kind of RPC calls.
Right.
Like,
so I guess instead of API, I guess what you meant, I guess, kind of packaged up like an SDK, maybe more would be sounding.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're working on the pull request, and so actually, we finished a lot of that stuff. That like the pull request for Bitcoin, we actually finished a while ago. But the problem is, there's no real way to evaluate it or check it out or do anything with it unless you have the blank sidechain as well. So we also made the sidechain, and we also made a prototype sidechain, which is of course just a copy of Bitcoin, but with like merge mining added and like with some of the other stuff in for that. It's kind of got like an ability to understand when coins are being sent to it, which is like something we added on that, so that would be easier. And so we have the pull request for Bitcoin. So there's almost like 3 different pieces of software on my computer if you ignore all the other pieces of software. There's like regular Bitcoin that I actually use for transactions, and then there's like the fork of Bitcoin that has sidechains, which is like a fork. It's like a soft fork of Bitcoin. It doesn't make any, you know, obviously it's totally for testing purposes. And then there's a third version of Bitcoin, which is the sidechain, but there's just nothing in it yet. But it's just a totally blank version of Bitcoin that uses merge mining and other stuff like that. So, but we have all that software, and I don't like talk about it a lot because I don't like to talk about, because there's so much hype in this space, and it just drives me crazy. It doesn't really drive me crazy. It's more depressing than anything else. It's sort of like a Colden Caulfield kind of like, why is everyone doing this? It's kind of so it's not. It doesn't really cause me any anxiety, but it's like. It's sort of some disdain, maybe, where I don't want to do anything like what other people are doing, where they hype all this stuff, and then it's all vaporware, and it's gross. So instead, I like to, you know, under-promise and over-deliver. So instead, I just promise nothing, and people just later they find out that, oh, I've been working on this. I have code. So I have code. We have a GitHub. We have documentation. We have tests of the money going back and forth round trip. So we're actually doing really well, and I think I'm really optimistic. It depends on a couple other things, some collaborative elements, but I think, you know, my goal, I mean, my hope would be, and it's kind of an ambitious hope, but my hope would be that after Segwit is done, that the community turns their attention to this, and I have no ability to force people to care about things that I like, but I hope that they're like this, and I hope that there will be interest in. I have a strong feeling that, I haven't confirmed any of this, but I have a strong feeling that miners would be interested in this, because it is kind of a soft fork way of them getting what they claim to want. They claim very loudly to want this extra scaling stuff. I'm really not sure. Like, I don't really want to take a position on like all these things. I think there's a lot of politics and stuff involved that's clouding a lot of people's judgment, which I don't like at all. But again, I see it as like, I try to interpret it as a fun problem to solve. Like, can we get everyone what they want? And I hope that the answer is yes. And I hope that people see it from my point of view, and that they kind of turn their attention to this, because even if something is coded up, I mean, Segwit was in a great place last December, which was effectively what it was like 11 months ago. So even though it was in a pretty good place design-wise, and even I think code-wise, it still took 11 months of like a team effort to get it actually shipped, and it still hasn't even activated yet. So, and who knows when it will activate? I think it will activate quickly, but you don't know. And so I would hope that people. I kind of am hoping that people are interested in pursuing this after Segwit. But yeah, a lot of the work is done.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Absolutely. And I think that after this whole blockchain debate is kind of mostly settled, I mean, because obviously the scaling debate is never going to end, right? It's like the internet, where it just kind of kept going, right? It wouldn't scale. The internet wouldn't scale for email, it wouldn't scale for video, and so on and so forth. So we got ways to go. But I'm hoping, like you, that after the block size debate is mostly kind of done with, after Segwit is activated, then we can turn our attention to things like sidechains and privacy, more privacy focused stuff like, Mimblewimble and things like that, and other things. So, because that's going to be a major thing that governments and corporations are going to want, not just them, but regular people too. As Bitcoin grows and becomes huge, we do want the most privacy that we can have as possible. So, really cool stuff. So that was, I do, while we're here, Paul, let me just ask you one bonus question here that I didn't have written down. And maybe we can even bring this to the rest of the panelists too, which is this. First, what is the difference between your Hivemind and such and Augur? And then what do we think about kind of like the future of prediction markets? Are they going to be here soon, quick, and how quickly are they going to change the world, and to what degree do you think? Go ahead, Paul.
So Augur was kind of an offshoot of, so I published the white paper for what is now known as Bitcoin Hivemind in like January 2014, so a very long time ago. And I published the code actually in December 2013. And so the people who would later go on to found Augur and create Augur, they contacted me in like April 2014. And then I spent a lot of time with them, kind of talking them through the idea. And then they kind of, it's kind of hard to explain, but sort of Vitalik kind of convinced them that it would be a great idea for them to build on Ethereum and to do a crowd sale and all that stuff. So at that point, I was kind of just allowed them to do their own thing. But I've just from my own experiences with working with them for something like 8 months in 2014, I did not expect them to succeed. And in fact, I've published a lot of stuff about how the Oracle technology won't work on Ethereum, even assuming that all of Ethereum's technical problems go away, which they certainly will not. So I don't know. I don't have a very high opinion of Ethereum. I think it's very, very strangely designed, like this phenomenon of you just building a solution and then looking for a problem, which I think is very unwise. And so I think it has a lot of issues. In fact, it's a very interesting thing about Ethereum that lots of different people with totally different backgrounds will point out totally different flaws in Ethereum. And I think they're all right. It's very kind of funny that way, that someone will point out like a computer science flaw about the code, you having to run the previous guy's code and yours, and you have to link all this stuff so that it's just a nightmare for you to be able to figure out if you're what you're executing. And then people will talk about the organizational problems at Ethereum, that the incentives are bad, and that there's excessive reliance on key people who are like going to cut and run, and that there's the ICO, everyone gets paid in advance, and there's some mysterious loans were made at high interest rates somehow, and those people are gone now. And then people will say, the economics are bad, how can it compete with a different token, and like where are the users, where's the demand for this, and like what is this deal about 2% inflation forever but a fixed amount so that it goes down, so that there's sort of a citation that that's what the Federal Reserve does, but the Federal Reserve aims for a high inflation so that it has room to cut if there's a recession, and that doesn't really make sense. In Ethereum, people can just go down the line, right? Like everything from the people working there to the setup, to the team, to like where are the users, to the computer science, to the attack surface. And one of my favorite criticisms of Ethereum is that it would be a victim of its own success if any part of it were successful, just based on the trade-off between specificity and generality. If there was anything successful on Ethereum, it would be tempted to branch off and do something that was specific to that and just ditch all this other stuff. Just as like if you got really good at playing baseball, you were driving around with like all this stuff, like a basketball and like a football and all this bowling shoes in your car, you would eventually just be like, well, I only want to play baseball. So, and you just dump all this other stuff out. You don't have any use for it. So there's like this kind of no clear equilibrium for me. I don't think Ethereum has a future, but it's done a great job of being very abstract, which has shielded it from criticism, and is kind of an emperor's new clothes thing. And so there's a lot of things to say. I actually did write on Bitcoin Hivemind. I wrote a piece called "The Case Against Augur," where I explain the history of Augur, and it's a little mean-spirited, but I felt I had to do it because some people were actually hearing the story from me and then retelling it. And I don't want to name names, but certain podcast hosts were retelling it not quite the way that I would tell it, and I just thought it would be better to just write my version, and then that would be my honest. But there was a number of things that they did that were dishonest, but it's kind of par for the course because almost everyone that does all these ICO, like almost every Ethereum project, almost every non-Bitcoin blockchain project, has done these dishonest things. So it's actually hard to. I'm happy that they took an interest in my project. I thought it did derail very quickly, and I thought they were kind of brainwashed by Vitalik, and they thought that Vitalik, whatever Vitalik does, is going to be the greatest thing. Right? Have you heard that before? Right? Like this is something that almost everyone will say, is that if Vitalik is in the DAO, then I'm in, because it's got to be revolutionary.
I mean, yeah, we saw some pictures tweeted the other day about an Ethereum convention, and it's just Vitalik's face everywhere, man. I'm talking about.
That's so funny to me.
It was like Chairman Mao, right?
Dude, it was straight like a religion. You should have seen it. Like his face was on like just in one picture, shot of a few people. His face was in 3 or 4 different places, on a stand-up over here, in the background over here, here, and here, and and he clearly is not stopping it, right? He's clearly not trying to tell people to, just kind of calm it down a little bit. I'm not an oracle, blah, blah, blah. But no, he's completely embracing this craziness that people are going over. And it's really absurd. That can only work for you so long. And, you've brought up a lot of the different flaws with Ethereum. So obviously I think you'll fit pretty good in here with the WCN, as we have been criticizing Ethereum for a while, for a long time. And it's just for all the reasons that you said. I mean, I don't even think you got to mention the fact that they're going to go proof of stake soon. I mean, there's just one thing after another. So
a lot to say about that. No, I had the exact same observation of what the posters with his face, and I was like, we don't have this. We don't have anything like this in Bitcoin. Like, can you imagine like a poster of like Greg Maxwell or like Adam Beck or something? Like a
Peter Todd.
Peter Todd poster. Yeah, and like lit up, like professionally lit on this big glossy thing. Like I had the exact same observation. I was like, oh, it's now getting clearer and clearer to everyone that this is just like the Vitalik buy-in. You're like investing in Vitalik, which is extraordinarily like, it's just such a bad idea. And I hope Vitalik is, I mean, you almost want to give him credit for being such a brave guy, because like, there's a lot of anonymous e-cash at stake if he like gets hit by a bus or something. And, some people drive buses into people like for money. And that's like an insane, I don't know why he's putting himself in that position. I've made a strong effort with Hivemind in particular to like try to write everything down so that if anything happens to me, it like won't matter. So I can discourage that kind of nonsense. But yeah, I had the exact same observation with the posters. It is bizarre. Like it is actually very telling. And you see the posters and you just think like, what is going on? Like this is so unusual. It is like Chairman Mao. And but yeah,
I think,
yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I wrote a long time ago, I wrote a great little essay on my blog about proof of stake, and Adam Back linked to it, and he kind of started my blog. My blog had like whatever 70 viewers per day, or like whatever the Google robot count is or something. And then Dr. Beck linked to it, and it got like 3,000 views over like a day, because I linked to it from Bitcoin Talk, and it came from him. But I had like this point about whatever you do, if this is a monetary thing, you're basically just auctioning off like $100, or you're auctioning off 25 Bitcoins, per block. You're just auctioning them off. You're just saying to the universe, you're all going to fight for these, and whoever fights the hardest will get it. And we're going to measure that somehow. We're going to measure that fighting. But it doesn't matter if it's proof of work or proof of stake. So this later evolved into a giant essay that was called "Nothing is Cheaper Than Proof of Work." And again, this is something that has happened between Vitalik and I. I mean, we were corresponding in a more or less dignified manner in the year 2014. And I was trying to convince him that this is stupid. Proof of stake is stupid, that everyone's tried it before. It's a waste of time because it doesn't save you any money. And he actually had all these kind of very complicated arguments about, technically this is deflation if we stake the coins and they're locked up. And I was like, no, that's not true, because when you unstake them later, I mean, if to the extent that that's true, you unstake them later and it's inflation, but in reality, it's just neither both times, because the only reason anyone would stake these is to earn the fees, and I'll take them later. So we had this like giant, very kind of theoretical, very economic kind of the technicals of microeconomics, this like conversation. And finally, I was just like, kind of like, I was like, whatever. I unsubscribed from his crypto economics like list, and I was just like, I wrote this essay like a few months later about nothing is cheaper than proof of work, and I put all this time into it. And then I published it, and then Vitalik's like, well, that's obvious, of course. So like, I tried all this time to convince him, and then it's like, oh, okay. And so then now they've retreated. The goalposts have moved again, and they've said, now we don't like proof of stake because of whatever. We like it because it's got better security properties. So before it was like proof of work is wasteful, but now they're like, I agree. Of course, it's obvious. It's obvious. Now that I wrote like a giant like 40-page essay, it's like now it's obvious, and everyone knows that it's the same, but they like it because it has better security properties. And it's just like, there's nothing you can do with these people. Like,
all you got to do, Paul, is write a new 40-page report.
I know, right?
Each time that they disagree with you, and then they'll listen, right? That's
no problem.
Actually, it's funny. People said the same thing to me early on. They were like, "There's no point in you arguing about proof of stake with these people, because as soon as you explain it to them, they will just change it to something else." And I was like, no, you don't understand. I've got the general counter argument. I can prove that no matter what it is just as wasteful as proof of work. And so therefore I will be the one to slay this dragon, right? And it will be finished. From now on, there will be no way of having the argument proceed. And of course, it was like exactly as I was warned. I publish this thing, and of course they find some other way of like having this continue. But because it is all hype based, and that's unfortunate. It's really sad to watch.
It's it's not just hype based. It's the fact that they really, really, really want to find something more secure than proof of work without doing proof of work. Right. That's the golden freaking ticket that everybody wants. Everybody wants Bitcoin without Bitcoin, right? Everybody, in the banks, Vitalik. I mean, freaking everybody.
Almost everything in Satoshi's white paper is about proof of work, and all the math is about proof of work.
The definition of the blockchain has proof of work in it. The actual definition that Satoshi came up with, which is the one that I subscribe to, and the one that most people that I think that are into Bitcoin subscribe to, and that contains the word proof of work. Without proof of work, it's not a blockchain, right? So you can definitely, have a structure of data that is in a block and that you can grab from that's, hashed from another block, but that's not really a blockchain still. That's just a data structure, right? So you need the proof of work to actually.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of things people don't understand. We could put them in a giant list, but at least one of them would be that everything the blockchain is just some file that I could just create on my computer if I wanted to. But the problem is that because of the proof of work, like it would take me a long time to make that file. But if any of this proof of stake, like all this stuff is just files that are just in folders. Like any of these stuff, like you could say block whatever, and I could just write some stupid piece of software that just pumps out a bunch of files that say, that have random transaction data in it. I can generate 1 billion keys and send money to myself, have some little simulation, and resimulate the whole blockchain just with no proof of work. So I don't think people realize like that the blockchain is just like one file somewhere that has like a big cumulative proof of work. And it takes so much hubris. It's just so, there's not really even a word for this, but it's like some kind of mixture of incompetent and disrespectful and kind of it's just outrageous really that someone could show up, they could show up and they could say, this technology is really interesting, we're going to do our own version of it, and then just do something that is not a version of it. I don't know how people get to that. That's a very
I'll tell you, Paul, one of these days we got to get some more pro Ethereum people on here because we just can't really find any that want to come on the show, because anytime somebody comes on the show, they got, either a guest to deal with or Gabriel to deal with or Tone to deal with. And they just apparently don't even want to like get into it. So,
hey, Paul, something that may help you understand what's going on here is make sure you're not underestimating the greed and stupidity of some people in the world. There's a bell curve, there's an average, there's extremes on both ends, and I would say blockchain developers are going to tend to need to be very, very intelligent, but as you pointed out, it requires intelligence and expertise in multiple areas, and finance and economics expertise is at a premium among developers, and I think that's the result. The altcoin scene is the result of that.
Yeah, I think you're completely right. I really did underestimate that. I think I have a very sober view of like people in general, and that people will act in their own self-interest, and particularly if they have like an anonymity kind of shield, they'll be especially and so I kind of knew all that, but there were a bunch of things that I thought just like no one would do that. Like no one. Don't people have any dignity whatsoever? Like they would never do that. It's so stupid. Like no one would do that. It's too undignified. But you are right that I misread that, and there are people doing things that I just was like totally. It's astounding that people put up with this stuff, and they're going to be on YouTube forever, right? And they're going to have grandchildren or great grandchildren, and those grandchildren will find this stuff and link it to their friends and make fun of their classmates about like what stuff that's been said, like it's totally absurd stuff. I mean, I just don't understand why people do this, but there are these people who are like get rich or die trying or something, and yeah, it's insane.
Dude, I'm really waiting for
that.
Exactly, Paul. Exactly. I'm really waiting for people to start coming down on the blockchain people, like Tim Swanson or the digital currency group people. Like I'm waiting for somebody to do that. So we'll see what happens. But once blockchain blows up, I'm sure Barry Silbert will have some kind of excuse. But we'll see what happens. So with that aside, that kind of puts us right into the next topic, which is has to do with Zcash and Ethereum. So before we go into that, everybody, if they could just tweet out the show, share the show, Facebook out the show, let everybody know we're here talking Bitcoin. We really appreciate all the tweets and attention we can get. Your attention brings more attention to Bitcoin, so we try to get the word out. The next topic is going to be for all the panelists here. But let's see. So we're going to start out with this. This is going to be interesting because we were talking about Ethereum, and now Zcash has had a whole different. We only do the show once every couple weeks. So there's all sorts of stuff that happens in between. And Zcash, was launched and crashed all in the time that before after my last show. So there's all sorts of stuff that has actually happened here, and so you can go into that a little bit too as well individually if you guys want to. But first, the question is basically with the Zcash launch, and it's now taking up Ethereum, at least half of Ethereum's hash rate. And so I wanted to get the panelists' comments on this. So first we'll go with Paul. What do you think about Zcash taking half of Ethereum's hash rate, and will the next coin just take half of Zcash's hash rate until the next one and the next one and the next one, and have them all just trade back into Bitcoin? What do you think, Paul?
Yeah, that's the perfect line of questioning, I think. A question that I've always wondered about is where is like the real zero? And so one of the reasons I like Dogecoin so much is I thought it represented like the actual zero of like coin market cap. Like you could say, okay, if you can't beat this, like you really screwed up, because this is something that is it is 100%, style over substance. It is just for fun, and it is just a bunch of people who got together. It's like if you do the hype in the community, you get that. So that's like the null hypothesis or something. It's something like giving it the null hypothesis status is kind of bizarre. But so lately I've been trying to figure out like where is Dogecoin the zero? Is something else the zero? So it's a good question. Like to what extent is, because we know that there is actual commerce behind Bitcoin. There are people who buy Bitcoin to use it to complete some task that they have, and then they must repurchase it and buy it again, and therefore other people are buying it and selling it and all this other stuff. And I know that most of these other projects, many of these other projects, like the DAO took it to a whole new level, but many of these projects, like they're not even finished, right? And so we know that there are no users because it's not even finished yet. But with the DAO, it was like the idea wasn't even finished. And even the DAO was like, we will invest this in ideas later. So it was like pre idea. It was like kind of this amazing regression of just like insanity. And so I don't know, like, where is the real zero? I think that's part of the question, which is that half the hash rate is going to leave from Ethereum to go to Zcash. Like, to what extent is this hash rate representative of anything, which I think is your point? And it's like this. It's one of the things that I really don't understand. Like why altcoins still exist. I understand they have some gambling and as well as some money laundering value indirectly and probably unintentionally. But it's amazing to me that they're still here years later. If someone asked me in 2012 or 2013 if we would still have Litecoin in 2016, I would have said no, but I would be just consistently wrong about this. So I've consistently just like overestimated or underestimated or some misestimated something about why these altcoins continue to exist. And there's a lot to say about Zcash. It's obviously the current iteration is a little disappointing given where we were in 2013 with the Zero Coin project that was from Matthew Green, that cryptographer from that university somewhere. That certainly has gotten very bizarre since then, and so it is kind of just another altcoin. JAA. I don't know. That kind of says it all for me. But yeah, I don't know. Like, what does this hash power represent? I think it's a good question, and I don't know. Like, I think the answer is clearly yes to your second question. That this is the major disadvantage to chasing the new trend, right? You say, okay, Ethereum gets all the new people who are the most innovative, but if something new comes up after that, you lose all those people. all the fashionistas, they go right to the next one. So it's a curse to get the people who are easily attracted, the people who are willing to try new things. They're also the least reliable. So that's an interesting thing.
Very interesting. We'll go with Daniel next, and then Gabriel.
Gotta unmute. All right. I agree. I mean, I'm not a Zcash, phenoid or anything. Is that a word? Fanatic. That's got to mean something. But yeah, I mean, we were talking earlier in the show about all this stuff that's just hype and just vaporware, and I think those are great terms. I mean, even Ethereum, it's been around for years, and I've been saying this on my show for also years, how we keep hearing about Ethereum. They keep saying it's awesome and it's, it can do all this stuff. And yeah, I'm not going to say it's all bad. It's, interesting ideas. It's an experiment and stuff. But to this day, other than the DAO, which completely failed, obviously, other than that, to this day, they still just haven't really done much. I mean, okay, they're on Coinbase now. That might mean something, but they haven't even it just feels like to this day, like not much has happened other than, this is really cool. Yeah. So yeah, I would say same thing with Zcash. Even if they do transactions great, even if they do it built in and super conveniently, which even that is probably up for debate. I'm sure there's all kinds of technical arguments about it. But even if they did it amazingly and almost perfectly and built in, even then, I mean, if you need to be anonymous with Bitcoin, you can do it. And Bitcoin, it already has a network effect. We've all known that for ages. And so I just don't really see any way for it to be any more than just like a side project for, certain people that might really need to be anonymous. But I see no chance in heck that it's going to actually displace Bitcoin for any reason. So it's just hype. I think it'll be around for a while, just like Ethereum is still around. And, Monero is still here, and that has a purpose in certain places. So I don't think it's going to be instant vaporware, but I don't expect it to be the next biggest thing in the world like a lot of people do.
Yep, that's what we've been kind of seeing. We've been hearing about Ethereum for years now, right? But they just have a list of hundreds of apps that are just, that are kind of pointless. They're not taking off. They're not really doing anything interesting. At least that the community has dubbed, right? They have, if you go, you can actually view all the D apps in Ethereum, and all of them have like 0 views or 1 view, and people just aren't there because people aren't. That's not where science is being done. That's where little script kiddies are going to have fun, playing with something new. The real science is being done in other areas, in things like Bitcoin and other coins. Even Monero is doing some interesting science, and even Dash has some interesting things. I wouldn't bet on Dash, but they're doing some things that are different. That's interesting. And so at the end of the day, you really have to prove yourself against Bitcoin's network effects. And so far, we haven't found any other coin that can really do that. Nobody's they've come, they've gotten a little, they've chipped away a little bit, like Ethereum got up to $1 billion market cap and things like that. But that's still nothing like compared to what Bitcoin is doing, its actual activity. It got to 1/10 the market cap, but 1/100th of the use, right? Or maybe 1,000th of the use, because the transactions just keep climbing in Bitcoin, and all for that one use case scenario, for actual global monetary system outside of the state. So we're seeing it grow, and we love it. We love to see it grow. So let's see here. Let's go to Gabriel next on this question. What do you think about Ethereum? Zcash taking half the hash power and all that goodness. What do you think?
I'm 0% surprised about the hash rate distribution shenanigans going on in the altcoin world. It's been pretty clear for a long time that the most of the miners that have been participating in Ethereum are just doing it to leverage their existing GPU mining hardware and to somehow recoup what they spent on it because it's now useless for Bitcoin. So these, I wouldn't be surprised at all if numerous altcoin projects that can be mined with GPUs are the brainchild of mining concerns, mining companies coming together to find some sort of use case where they can recoup their investment in their hardware. And we've known that about Ethereum for a long time, since before it launched, really. It's, miners were openly talking about it. Wow, geez, I hope this thing catches on because it would be great to turn on my GPU miners and not have them just gathering dust, because I can't get any money for these old GPUs that are too slow to do the newest games and stuff. I can't unload them all on eBay. I've got 600 of these things or whatever. And so, of course, Zcash comes along. They've got the right marketing and PR for the mining CTOs to notice and set up their mining nodes and software. So, geez, they do the math on the back of the hand really quick, really easy. Like, the Zcash thing is going to be ultra limited edition in the beginning. We certainly got to pull off all of our crappy, Ethereum stuff that's just making us pennies right now. With this relatively high hash rate, shunt it on over to Zcash and make at least a few bucks, or make a few Bitcoin. So obviously we're going to unload it all for Bitcoin. If it completely fails, we'll just move it back to Ethereum. But meanwhile, higher profit margin on this speculative hype machine. And I completely agree with Paul that alts have a function in gambling, and it's just really raw speculation, but really more gambling, I would call it. As possibly, as a randomizing thing, which is actually a really interesting use case for alts. I mean, to move from one blockchain to another, boy, that's pretty tough to track. Even if Eric Voorhees is, working for the CAA on the side in Switzerland and sending all his data to the NSA or whatever, eventually, what's it called? His service will be disintermediated by a decentralized version, and then no one will be able to track anything. So I think that an anonymity and privacy and fungibility in coins is coming, no matter what anyone says. In my opinion, it's 100% definite thing. Now, the way we're doing it now, maybe with Shapeshift, for example, is sort of the clunky, centralized current way. But as time goes on and as technologies develop, that some of which are once again being developed in these altcoins, that's another genuine use case. They are test nets for features that can be merged into Bitcoin at some time in the future. So I think there's going to be experimental fringe altcoins forever that will hardly be used, that will mostly be speculative vehicles. I don't really think that any one of them will ever unseat Bitcoin for blockchain currencies. It would have to differ so greatly from Bitcoin and offer such a strong, distinct feature set from Bitcoin, that could not ever be replicated. So, because once you can say, you know what, I'll just take that Dash thing that they did there and bring it into Bitcoin, no problem, or bring it into a side chain. Side chains make alts even that much more useless. So I have a feeling that we're gonna see the alt scene over the next 10, 20 years gradually devolve into a genuine testnet situation where they hardly have any value, where they're probably going to be valued as much as literally Bitcoin test coins, which do have a value. I'm not sure what they're worth, but something like a cent each or something. They cost something. You got to pay to get on the Bitcoin testnet because there's real miners. But I have a feeling that it's going to take a long time for speculators teenagers, you know, that are investing in these things or playing around with them, speculating to finally realize. I mean, we've had this story happen 10, 20, 30, 40 times already where it's just a little hype thing and then just completely collapses. You know, Ethereum, I would say, is the most valuable one that collapsed down to a certain point. But I think that's a function of the the success level of the ICO, and not really anything on the functionality side. Which, you know, it still remains to be seen. That we could all be proven wrong here, but I definitely think the logic, the economic situation, and the code is very much against altcoins ever gaining much of a foothold in the world, unless they have some sort of feature set or some sort of characteristics that are really different from Bitcoin. For example, SafeCoin hasn't launched yet, made safe, still in alpha, but that's a non-blockchain cryptocurrency. It's has almost nothing to do with Bitcoin. Now, of course, if it's going to be competing as a crypto cash, you know, I have a feeling that there might not be, I don't know, it's another proof of resource, you know, proof of work type of coin that could, you know, conceivably gain a foothold because it's just so totally different from Bitcoin. So something like that, I think those things can maybe gain some sort of value. You've also got dApps, which can be built on top of any blockchain and have tokens that are tied directly to some sort of economic activity. And I think that that would be an example of a distinct type of crypto money that whose value, instead of deriving from mining, from proof of work, could derive from some other provable economic external activity. You know, that's an example of another token I think that could gain value in the world. But all these speculative alts, including Dash, Monero, all of them, they're just test nets for what we can merge into Bitcoin, in my opinion.
Very well said. And, you know, whether people like it or not, the fact that, you know, Bitcoiners call most of these alts test nets, you know, whether they like it or not, we're all test nets, right? Bitcoin's a test net, you know, sort of. So this is all a big experiment, and we're all experimenting. But clearly, Bitcoin has survived what no other coin really has, which is almost 8 years now of being in the wild and still surviving, right? So that's a big, huge thing. You know, Ethereum's only a couple years old, and that's the closest or the closest value next to Bitcoin. I guess Ripple would be, but.
And how many hard forks have they already done?
Right, exactly. How many hard forks? They did 2 in 1 freaking week. Just recently, it was dubbed the double hard fork or the double fork, something like that. So, yeah, it's just kind of ridiculous. How Bitcoin is still going with its original chain, for almost 8 years, and everybody wants it, but nobody can get it, right? So it's one big experiment. So really cool stuff. We can move on to the next topic. Before we do, I just want to again thank my guests so much again for joining on. You know, we do the show at 8 p.m. Pacific every other Monday, so it's a little bit late, but we figure people can watch it the next morning, you know. So
hey, I'd like to add something really quick to my rant.
Yeah.
About altcoins. One of the other another function of altcoins that I think that is actually valuable and important, and that whose value probably has a limited lifespan, is proving that attacking a blockchain is of no use. In other words, they form a defensive shell around Bitcoin because it's like, well, you go ahead and attack Bitcoin, but we've actually got 1,000 other blockchains we could just go to. We could just shunt all our value into Litecoin, shunt all our value into Feathercoin, Peercoin, Folding Coin, and anything else. You want to attack us, you're just going to create, you know, more. You're just going to create more problems for yourself. You know, the more you attack us, the stronger we'll be. So that's an interesting sort of more philosophical use case of altcoins, where it's a kind of buffer.
I completely agree with that. I think it's pretty interesting. In fact, I would almost go a step further and say that, like, Ethereum. So, like, one thing that the altcoins do is they suck a lot of the totally crazy people who are like, I mean, everyone in Bitcoin is already crazy, but like a lot of people are like crazy squared or something, and they're like, there's a place for them, and it's Feathercoin or whatever, and then they're going to tell everyone about how only Feathercoin and Litecoin and Bitcoin are the 3 real ones. But all the other ones are fake, and they're going to have some weird conspiracy theory or something bizarre about that. But and that's double for Ethereum. But one great thing about all this hype, the blockchain hype, Ethereum hype, or whatever, is that I think it has distracted the adversaries. That the people who would want to bother this project, now they face a very confusing landscape, right? Because we have a Consensus 2016 conference where it's like the governor of Delaware is like giving a speech, and Larry Summers was there giving a speech, and it's all like pro blockchain tech. So it's like, what do you do now? Like, it's sort of like, what do you do with that? I don't know. If you're like someone who wants to harass Bitcoin, it's sort of like, is Delaware pro blockchain or what? Like, what did you think a blockchain was? Like, it's like very bizarre. So I think that is actually something that I'm glad that we got that gift, that Ethereum was able to show people that they should be tolerant of blockchains. They're promoting blockchain tolerance. So I think that's a great, somehow we got something out of it. So I'm actually legitimately thankful for that. I think that's nice.
I mean, yeah, these chains are teaching us all sorts of stuff, and so obviously we learned quite a bit about Ethereum with the split, the chain split, and things like that. So there's just untold amounts of wealth of information that we can get from these coins. So, and I think we'll continue to get them. People basically kind of don't really understand how Bitcoin is anti-fragile. Like the more you attack it, the stronger it gets. And there's a lot of people that were using that excuse for Ethereum. And they were just like, just keep attacking us, right? There was even an update that was called "Come at me, bro," right? Like they just keep taunting. And the difference really is the fact is that there's fundamental flaws with Ethereum that you just can't fork out. And with Bitcoin, there hasn't been any fundamental flaws that you can just fork out. There's been a couple of little problems. There was, of course, a mini hard fork, but there's nothing that underlying it. You just can keep attacking, right? You just going on. And so. Yeah, please.
Yeah, I agree. I think you're right. There is a difference. On one hand, I think they're both anti-fragile, but I think it's like with Ethereum, you get a second thing, which is that you kind of get this weird feeling like you don't know how long is it going to take to actually converge to something that works. Because with Bitcoin, it's sort of like you plugging up the holes as you find them, and so as you plug up the holes, it's sort of like you become more and more confident that there are no more holes remaining. But with Ethereum, it's kind of really not like that at all. It's like you find a hole, and then you're like, oh, wait a minute, there's like a whole other section of the boat that has holes in it. And then you find like, oh, there's a whole other section of the boat that has holes in it. And then you're like, how big is this boat anyway?
Well,
there are holes everywhere.
They keep building new decks onto the boat, and then the new fixes have holes in them too.
Yeah, the hard fork is not plugging a hole as well. The hard fork is just like, okay, totally different boat appeared, and it's like it does reset the clock completely. And I don't know why. To me, that's self-evident, and it seems to be some kind of controversial point, even in Bitcoin, but definitely in Ethereum. I don't know why. The hard fork is a totally new boat. And so that could be a good thing if you really screwed up the first boat, but it is a totally new thing. And with the soft fork, you are at least accumulating something. You're accumulating some because that that it's restricting the state space of where you can travel. It's like everything it was before, but shrinking. So that you can't step on any landmines that. You are becoming mathematically less and less likely to have unexpected behavior. I mean, you could soft fork and just 51% attack, so all the blocks are empty, and then you would never have any unexpected behavior because you would always do exactly what you expect, which is nothing. But my point is, like, the soft fork does get you closer and closer to no bugs because you're just doing fewer and fewer things. But Ethereum has hard forked, and each hard fork, in my opinion, resets the clock on like how long it's going to take you to be secure. So it's like, in my opinion, it's like several years. So, but Ethereum just keeps resetting it back to zero. I don't know why they do that, but on the other hand, I know exactly why they do that, because they want to be different. They are leading a campaign to to kind of be an alternative to Bitcoin. And since the conservative slot is already taken, they want to be like more liberal and kind of more responsive and more agile or whatever. That's not going to work for them, in my opinion, but that's what it is.
Yeah, some people in the chat are saying fork the hole. All we gotta do is just fork the hole. We should probably make that. We should probably get that trending. Hashtag fork the hole.
That's the episode title.
Yep, fork the hole. So that's what needs to happen. I kind of like to think of it like there's a boat and they're patching the hole, right, the big hole. But with each nail that they push in, they're like creating more holes, and it's not securing it. And eventually, they're just gonna freaking go right through the patch. So we'll see what happens with Ethereum. I'm still obviously, I know everybody here is still excited to find out what's going to happen with Ethereum, because you freaking just don't know, right? The amount of drama that they have brought to the crypto space single-handedly is worthy of a Oscar award-winning movie, I'm sure, one day. So we'll get to that. We'll see what happens with that. But I think we can move on to the next topic next. So before we do that, if everybody could just tweet out the show if they got a second to copy and paste the link, tweet out, Facebook out, share out the show. We try to share with as many people as we can. We got 40 people viewing right now. We usually get that's about right. We usually get about 40, 50 people viewing. So, we do this show live at 8 p.m. Pacific every other Monday. And we're about ready, I think, to move on to the next topic. So this next topic is very exciting to me. This actually, again, was another thing that happened in between our shows, because we only do our shows every other week. So this is a pretty big news, and I'm excited to see what Paul thinks about this as well. So we have Segwit released, right? Finally, Segwit is released. It's not activated yet, but it is released, and it has a hard date of next November. To be able to be actually activated. So Paul, let me ask you, what do you think of Segwit being released? Did it come too soon? Did it come too late? Is it just the right time? And when do you think it's going to be activated? And what does this really mean for Bitcoin, like, overall?
Segwit is wonderful, and it does a lot of cool things. The biggest is, of course, it allows you to use Lightning. It basically minimizes the amount of times you have to check in with the blockchain in order to use Lightning. So you can use it kind of just theoretically one time. One blockchain transaction could theoretically take care of you for your entire life, depending on your earning and spending habits, and that would be pretty cool. And so that's a neat thing. Another thing is that it opens the door to Schnorr, which opens the door to having an incentive to use CoinJoin, which is like mega huge upgrades to like inherent privacy, and the Lightning Network itself is a huge privacy upgrade. So there's lots of cool stuff associated with Segwit. But of course, what everyone is talking about is the drama associated with denying. One group wants to deny another group something they want, and another group wants to repay the favor. So basically, the miners, or some miners. So the way to just review some bullet points, I'm sure everyone already knows all this, but the way soft forks have historically been rolled out is they set a little flag, and then the flag rolls past, and then they start keeping track of the miner's opinion on whether or not the soft fork should activate or not. And as they keep track of this, miners embed a little information in the Coinbase, which is something that only the miners can do once per block. And so they track over some number of blocks if you hit 95%, so 950 out of the last 1,000 or something like that. And then if you have a high enough count, this signals to everyone that the miners have upgraded their software. So then it activates the soft fork. And from then on out, those 5% who are non-compliant, or anyone who decides to be non-compliant, even 100% in theory, those blocks are rejected as invalid, and so the entire network can upgrade. But the entire network can upgrade in a really awesome way, such that users do not have to upgrade their own software. So they don't have to worry about accidentally upgrading to something that steals all their money. They don't have to be computer scientists themselves. They don't have to read the code. They don't have to care about any of this upgrade politics. They just keep doing what they're doing, and all is well. You can even downgrade if you want. You can say, I upgraded I'm using Segwit. I don't like it. I'm going to install an old version. So there's a lot of friendliness associated with the soft fork. But the trick is you have to get this 95% threshold, or that's the mechanism upon which the soft fork relies. And there's some group via BTC, as well as a few others, comprising more than 5%, want to veto the Segwit change. They basically don't want to do it. There's some bullet points about that, one of which is that any mining group with 51%, so even if you only got 85 or 90% or whatever, such a group, a big majority group, can just orphan those votes and just not count them. And they could just say, we're just not going to count those blocks at all, and then we'll get 100% easily. You can guarantee that you'll get 100% and that you'll have the longest chain. So there's a lot of stuff at play here. It's all very dramatic, but the sort of operating theory of via BTC is that something bad happened to them, and now they want to. They're doing a very basic kind of strategic thing. When this news broke that someone was going to try and block the activation of Segwit, it was very surprising. It was in Milan right after Scaling Bitcoin conference. It was on Monday or Tuesday, the hackathon where they were going to ship Segwit. A lot of people were very surprised, a lot of developers and other researchers who were there. They were like, why would they do that? Why would they block Segwit? It doesn't make any sense. That's so illogical. They wanted a block size increase, and now they're getting one. But it really wasn't surprising to me. This is like a basic thing of strategy, which is that you have to make what you do. In the realm of strategy is what Tom Schelling, who more or less invented all the cool game theory that everyone learns, he called strategy a domain of interdependent action. So it's where two people are acting, and one person's actions affect the other person, and the other person's actions affect the other person. So there's this interdependence. And so the solution, usually when there's some kind of conflict, is to tie your behavior to what your opponent is doing, such that your opponent has to choose for both of you. And so it's really just a basic application of that principle, that these people are saying, unless I get what I want, you are not going to get what you want. And as soon as you give me what I want, I'll give you what you want. But I'm not sure how it's all going to play out, because, as I say, you never really know. A lot of this mining stuff is what they call cheap talk, where they can say that they're going to block Segwit, but we don't know if they really will. And people can even say that they are going to orphan dissenting votes. We don't know if they'll actually do that, and we don't know what the reaction would be if they did, if that would be seen as setting. It's sort of like the nuclear option. They were going to, in the United States Congress, they were going to remove the filibuster thing so that anyone who had a majority in the Senate could ram everything through. But a lot of people who were in the majority in the Senate didn't want to do that, because they feared, rightly so, even though they had 55 or whatever, and it would let them do 55 out of 100 votes, and they would let them do whatever they wanted today, a lot of people opposed this so-called nuclear option because they realized correctly that there might come a time when they were, 49 or 45, and then their opponents would be able to ram anything they wanted through the Senate. So they kind of wanted to keep it as a stalemate. So it might, there's a sort of, it might be interpreted as a nuclear option, the blocking of the votes. They might say, we could block their 5% votes, but what is this going to become? Maybe next time someone is going to get together a 51% group, and they're going to block all of our blocks, just, and we'll get nothing. We'll be orphaned all the time, or whatever, or where was this road going to lead? But maybe they won't conclude that, or maybe they'll change, the developers will change the activation threshold to 90%. So there is actually a lot of very fun stuff. I mean, it's really fun if you are into strategy or game theory, because you can watch all this stuff happen right before your own very eyes, and you can see it all happen in the real world, which is like, real science, real kind of empirical. Like Charles Darwin was a naturalist, right? And he went around with the journal and did all the sketches, and Jane Goodall with the chimpanzees or whatever. It's like you can go out there in the real world, and you could see this is like real game theory happening. There's all kinds of relationships that have to be maintained. and yet there are other relationships that have totally deteriorated and exploded, and those people hate each other now, and like anti-relationships, and there's like all this amazing stuff. But yeah, so you asked me about Segwit, and that's basically a lot, and I don't want to monopolize the conversation, but there's so much to say about it, and that's like, I think that's a good overview of the major interesting points in my opinion.
For sure. I think some of the people in the chat are saying we think you need your own podcast, Paul, because you have a lot of stuff to unpack, and it's great, and we love to hear it. And I think via BTC, I think we can all agree that's more or less just a power grab, right? If they really wanted bigger blocks, they would just fork and create their own chain with their own coin, but they won't, right? So they're just going to keep trying. So we'll see what happens.
That only has value because the programmers want to ship Segwit. It has nothing to do with anything except that it lowers the happiness of the developers, who they perceive as being in control of their happiness to some extent, because they would be happier, or they think they would be happier. A part of this is that I can't tell to what extent people just feel like they've been humiliated or embarrassed, right? Because they've been fed promises, or there were misunderstandings. And that is a real shame if we have massive discord and suffering just because people have misunderstood each other. Or because people misunderstood kind of what this constant talk about this Hong Kong agreement, which is supposedly been violated, and you hear, like, you talk to 12 different people and you get 12 different stories about that, and that leads me to conclude that there's like some kind of big misunderstanding there.
There is a big misunderstanding, I think, and Peter Todd just kind of recently outlined it a little bit in a talk that was just went up on YouTube. I think it was in France, the current meetup over there. Forget the name of that meetup, but he was just basically saying how it was supposed to be like his idea about how everybody can just get together in one room and hash it out. But what it ended up being perceived as like this central planning thing where nobody else has any say, it's just them, and so that kind of backfired a bit, is what he was saying. And they're gonna nobody knows the right answer. Nobody knows the right answer for consensus. All we can do is keep trying different ideas and hope that something works. But we'll see what happens. Real quick, Paul, just for fun, we have to have you create a soundbite for John Seth and Christy Rose and their show. So you got to say the word shard and sharding.
Shard and shard. I thought I was going to say. I thought I was going to say you're listening to Bitcoin Uncensored, but no, I'll say shard and sharding.
Yeah. There we go. So now they'll use that, and yeah, we'll get them on the show at some point. Christy Rose and John Seth. They're gonna hopefully not like insult me too much, because like they won't be interviewing me. I won't really be interviewing them. We'll just be talking.
You never know.
Yeah. We'll just be talking.
I'm not sure if they're. I mean, do they even interview people, or is it just like the universe just. It's blockchain Jesus, all the way.
They interviewed all sorts, man.
Interviews between blockchain Jesus and the disciples of the blockchain. There's no real, scaling to infinity millions transactions. We got to get that one for the soundboard.
Yes. Also, perpetual motion machine. Say that.
Yeah, perpetual motion machine. Yeah.
There we go. That's some good sound bites right there. Okay, cool. All right, let's move on to Daniel and what you think about Segwit, man. What do you think about this historic release?
Yeah, that was a great overview, Paul. I agree with a lot of it. It is great stuff. It'll do great things. And regarding the drama, I don't even want to talk about it too much, because it's been going on for over a year, this whole, scaling Bitcoin argument and everything. So yeah, I think you're right. It is just a power grab. It is just a group of people trying to get what they want, fed up, whatever. I mean, it's drama, it's argument. It's going to happen in any community, no matter what. And I've probably done it before. I'm sure I have, and I argue about things and I take a stand, whatever. It's probably, for the most part, it's probably not malicious. It's probably just people thinking, oh, I think I know what's best, and I want to get what I want, and I'm going to try to, not adopt Segwit. I I don't care. Like I think I said this on this show before, so I won't get into it too much. But I remember John Stossel talking about climate change, and he said, you know, I'm not a climate change skeptic. I'm a climate catastrophe skeptic. And anytime there's drama in the Bitcoin space, I'm kind of a catastrophe skeptic. Yeah, I mean, you can argue, and you know, one of you is probably even right, you know, but I don't really care. I mean, you know, you guys can fight it out for me, and whichever one's right, I think is going to win, and I'll be fine. And there are some things that I'll, you know, if I do care about something, and you know, I'll do research and maybe have a stand, but not everything, and especially not when there's a ton of drama. In this case, my stand is for Segwit. I've only heard great things about it. I don't see really any drawbacks to it, so I'm fine with Segwit. Let's do it. With the block size, I'm fine with the current block size. Don't really see a need to increase it. If you want to argue, go for it. Whatever. So anyway, that's regarding the drama. I'm just a catastrophe skeptic. Because I don't care much about that, I will point out one other thing that's a little more, I think, positive about this whole situation. And that would be just the whole idea of a soft fork and all the work that they've put into this with, I mean, they've been testing it for over a year or so. And I guess it's just a reminder about what all it takes to change Bitcoin at all, even for a soft fork. They're shooting for 95%. And I mean, technically 51% can do whatever they want. But yeah, they're shooting for 95%. They've tested it for over a year on the test net and stuff. And it's been ready for a couple months, and they've still been testing it. And, you know, they've got all the technicalities with version bits and flags and signals and all this. And I don't know what that even means. I would just say it's pretty cool and it's pretty important. It's a reminder about the fragility of Bitcoin and how careful we have to be whenever we make any changes like this. And I mean, I think they're doing a pretty decent job of you know, being careful and still doing something pretty interesting. Okay, and then one last thing. My prediction, this is also kind of regarding the drama, but my prediction would be that the anti-Segwit group is going to turn out kind of like Bitcoin XT. Like, oh, they'll get a bit of hype and some voters for a little bit, but it's just going to blow off. You know, we've got a year to get 95%. I think we will, no problem, because like I said, I've really heard nothing but good stuff about Segwit, except from the dramatic people. And yeah. So eventually, people are just going to be like, yeah, it's Segwit, it's fine. I'll vote for it. I think it's just going to blow off like Bitcoin XT just kind of disappeared. So there you go.
It's just really crazy how so many people come out and say, why do we need this complicated 1,000-line fix of Segwit when all we need to do is change a number? And you know, that's when you know right there what level, you know, like Bitcoin Uncensored, right? They start at level 0 with a person, and they move up the levels and see if they can move up with them. The guests can move up with them, right?
Well, if you could do it by just changing one line, we would have done it like that,
right? Yeah, that's level 0 of your knowledge of Bitcoin and cryptography. If your argument for Segwit is that it's too complex, we all we need to do is change one number. So yeah, if it was just to change one line, clearly that would have been done long ago. This is much more political. This is much more technical, and this is much more complex. And this is nothing short of what on the line than the outcome of Bitcoin, right? The actual proliferation of Bitcoin. So that's a pretty big thing on the line. I don't think that the core project wants to, the Bitcoin core team wants to risk that very lightly. So we'll see how this plays out. And like Daniel said, we got a year. I really think that we're gonna get that. I think we're already like at 15 or 20% the last time I took a look. I just tweeted out a link for it today. But it looks like 13.1 is actually in the lead right now for implementations. So for Bitcoin implementation. So we'll see how that goes. Finally, we'll go with Gabriel on what you think of Segwit being released. Yes.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. I did make a prediction that the anti-Segwit votes would total 3.8% at the end of the first period, which is happening at the end of November. So I'm sticking with that prediction, although it's looking like via BTC and Bitcoin.com mining pools are hovering around 9% right now, kind of bouncing around. But my prediction, I'm still holding on with prediction of 3.8%. I think it's going to activate on the very first difficulty adjustment period. But a couple of thoughts that I had while you guys were talking, and it was really interesting to hear Paul's a little bit more insider view on it. First of all, I just want to emphasize, no one really knows. No one can know because it's never been done before. We've never been in this situation before. We've never had a blockchain that was reaching capacity before, and we needed to figure out how to do it without centralizing too much and keeping the integrity of the system. No one really knows. So anybody claiming certitude about this, it should be doubted. On the other hand, it's pretty interesting to read between the lines on the anti-Segwit side and to see what kind of tactics they're using. You know, basically sort of bribery. I mean, Veer is offering to double miners' block rewards just for voting against Segwit. So that's just a raw, as Paul pointed out, game theoretical bribery situation in order to get his way. So that's almost like a little bit of a proof of stake kind of situation in an abstract sense. And it's really sort of transparent. Like, okay, well, you couldn't persuade the technical figures in the space with logical arguments, so now you're just going to bribe people. That's a sign of obvious weakness. So that's only something that you would resort to if your arguments are too weak to persuade.
It's like a sign of defeat, if you ask me. I mean,
well, not yet. I mean, we haven't had the vote yet. So he's doing the best he can to get his desired result. And I really think that, I mean, it's clear to me personally, and this is something that I can't prove. This is just my opinion. It's very clear to me that it's the same figures, Veer, bankrolling, and whatever other people they can drag onto it to back up the big block agenda. It's very clear to me that it's been a consistent effort since early 2015, at least, if not longer. 2015? Wait. Yeah, that's right. Early 2015 is when Classic was being launched, or was it XT? Which one was first?
XT was first, and then Classic.
Right. So that was when XT was, publicized. I'm sure there was, it was in the works before that. And what I think is really behind it, and this is total conspiracy theory, I'm just really talking out my ass here, but I feel certain about it personally. I think that this is one of several efforts by power brokers in our society to try to head off disintermediation by cryptographic money. And just like the NSA for decades, and this is proven, the NSA has been weakening cryptographic standards, has been undermining open source software projects such as Linux. You just look at systemd, which is a completely backdoor riddled mess that is forms the kernel of Linux, the most widely used operating system in the world, is absolutely riddled with security problems and bugs. So if you think that open source software is some sort of panacea where because it's transparent and people can see the code base, you're very much underestimating the cleverness of hiding bugs and backdoors and security holes, intentional security holes in plain sight. And I think that is exactly what's going on in Bitcoin. We've got, I'm sure there are some developers on the NSA and maybe CIA, and other agencies around the world, China, Russia. It's not in any nation state government's interest to have their ability for money creation and control over the money supply, which greatly enriches a tiny microscopic elite at the top of all these nation states. It's not in their interest to have Bitcoin succeed ever. Unfortunately for them, Bitcoin is a network protocol. You can't directly attack it and just pretend like you could kill it. I mean, actually, Bitcoin has some very strong weaknesses, not strong weaknesses, some large, intense weaknesses that can be exploited, not just DDoS and spam attacks, but also hardware level attacks. I mean, our internet right now is not very decentralized. It's a huge risk. So this is something that we all need to be concerned about with Bitcoin. It's not like you can just make it illegal and pretend like it's going to go away, but it's also not immune from these attacks. And I think that, you know, with all these risks to Bitcoin, this is one of the many angles that they're trying to use to undermine it. Luckily for us, they're not really working because the arguments are weak. They don't have the brainwashing power that they used to. They don't have the propaganda machine like they used to. The mainstream media's power to influence the minds and hearts of the populace is rapidly crumbling and waning, as we can see in elections all around the world and social happenings all around the world. So it is my opinion that the XT Classic Unlimited series of what I might call political attacks on the Bitcoin ecosystem. In this case, a political attack that's attempting to fracture the network and also introduce incredibly buggy, total shit implementations of something that resembles Bitcoin but is actually riddled with horrible bugs. So, you know, Classic was just, you know, Vortex and I were just talking about it today. You know, the code base is so weak that it's got these buffer overflow bugs that are easily visible to any amateur security software professional. So, well, amateur professional, low-level security professional, let's say. So I think that what we're seeing here is figures, political figures in the Bitcoin space that were deemed to be vulnerable to bribery and or coercion by nation state actors and possibly organized crime, probably just nation state, and, you know, secret society, that type of stuff. I think that, you know, Gavin Andreessen was surely his children's lives were threatened, and then he was, you know, coward and bullied into supporting this software that, you know, it's quite obvious to an experienced developer like him that it's total trash. And you know, the way he's acting, the things that he says are just so not believable from everything he said before a certain date, which was, of course, when he went and spoke with the CIA, which is, you know, a known date. So, and, you know, Satoshi called him out for that, and so that was the red flag, and it was very obvious that was a risk point, and we saw the result of that. And I think Vera is in the same situation. He's a holder of a lot of Bitcoin, and they said, hey, you know what, do this stuff or we'll kill you. You can still tweet out about libertarianism and how governments are bad and do your other rhetoric, as long as you can be our guy and throw your Bitcoin behind these ventures that we've come up with. We will not shoot you in the head tomorrow. So I think this is an attempt to undermine the viability of Bitcoin, and it's really a political attempt. I don't really think that anybody behind this project actually thinks they're going to succeed. I think that a lot of people that they've persuaded persuaded that big blocks are the way to go are convinced of that, and they're totally honest. I think there's tons of people out there that have been genuinely convinced and persuaded by whatever arguments, and they're not part of this, you know, scheme to undermine Bitcoin at all. They just genuinely hold that opinion. And like I said, none of us know for certain, so there is a chance that they could be correct. But I think that you know, the consensus of the developers is to be respected, and from the rhetoric and arguments that I've seen, Segwit is the way forward. But I will say that I do think a hard limit in the Bitcoin code base for the block size is what they call a magic number in computer science. And the magic number is basically just shoving a random number into your code and not really having a reason for it. And I don't mean pi. I mean not a number that doesn't have, you know, some sort of valid mathematical reason for existing, like 1 megabit. It's not. That's definitely a magic number. So I definitely think that Segwit is an awesome, incredible step forward for Bitcoin. But for the block size capacity issue moving forward with for the mining paradigm, I do believe that some sort of flex cap or other solution where the block size limit has some sort of other, or you know, where block sizes are determined in some other way than a magic number, is going to be necessary for Bitcoin at some point in the next, let's say, 8 years. Maybe we might even have more leeway than that, but a number of years from now, it's going to start to become urgent once we've dealt with, you know, this on-chain scaling stuff that Segwit enables, and, you know, some of the privacy and fungibility stuff. I think we're going to have to come and revisit the proof of work paradigm a little bit and figure out a long-term solution that doesn't need to, you know, keep being randomly changed to different magic numbers.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, it's kind of like the South Park episode where they're making fun of Dr. Pepper. Nobody can know, right? Like nobody can know what if Dr. Pepper is more of a cola or more of a root beer. Nobody can know, and it's really interesting. You know, the only thing that's going to be for sure is that this stuff is going to play out over time, and we're not going to know until we know. So it could take some time. So it's very interesting stuff, and it's going to be amazing to watch it all play out. You know, as Andreas likes to say, right, we're going to do everything. We're going to do, like you said, Gabriel will probably do some kind of flex. We'll do on-chain, we'll do off-chain, we'll do Schnorr signatures. We're going to do it all, right? Inverted Bloom filters, we're going to do everything. So over time, I think that the scaling issue will be solved, similar to how the internet was solved, you know, obviously because of the amount of people that want this to work, the amount of innovation, the permissionless, open, global innovation solves most problems over time. So really cool stuff.
Yeah, I got some bullet points actually. So
please.
First, I think I'm almost certain that we will activate Segwit quickly. Even if you have 9% against, it's just a matter of statistics that you'll probably end up with a sequence that includes 950 out of 1,000. But even if you aren't, it's very likely that you'll get really close, right? You'll hit a lot of them early, and then, you know, the very last out of the 1,000, the very last will be a few votes against you in a row, right? And then there'll be a huge temptation to just be like, well, we weren't really in favor of orphaning them before, but let's just orphan these last 5 and then just get it done. And we got it done. So it's hard. You need a lot, since there's a stochastic element, right? It's not just like you get 5 and you can veto. You also need luck. You can get, if you have 2% and you're really lucky, you can also veto. If you need a lot of consistent luck if you only have 9. So I'm pretty confident we'll have it by, I'd be very surprised if we don't have it in 2017. I'd be very surprised. Like January 1st. Like if we don't, I mean, I'll be surprised if we're not on that path. I have a cool, the scaling sidechain concept is sort of a flex cap in itself, where the main chain specializes in being very small, and the scaling sidechain just specializes in being as large as possible. So it's just growing aggressively and accommodating users and transacting low fee transaction stuff, and that's sort of easier to do on the sidechain, and it's just bigger, and like if it gets too big and dies, we can just create another one or something, and people can recover their money. And I kind of written a lot about that, but I have kind of a neat idea that I kind of tried to sneak in there. And then I think to the point about state actors affecting Bitcoin, I think the biggest friend that we have is the soft fork, as I was saying before, which is that if you intimidate people, there's just not a lot you can do if it's a soft fork. If it's a real soft fork, and actually it's funny, I have a blog post about, because the soft fork, the hard soft dynamic really isn't quite good enough. So actually, I have a post where I'm trying to improve the language, and I don't know if anyone will care, but I'm going to try to do a distinction between hard and soft. And then I have one that's actually, once it's soft, it can either be mean or kind, and then it can be loud or soft. And if it's soft and kind and soft, then I just call it a soft fork. But if otherwise, there are these other dimensions where, like, how much of what you could do before is it filtering, and to what extent do you feel obligated to upgrade? Like with Segwit, there's like a benefit. And so if you're like the last guy standing, you don't really need to upgrade, but at a certain point, you'll undergo like social and technical and network pressure and economic pressure to upgrade. Whereas that isn't true of something like pay to script hash, where you can still pay to something that's not a script hash. You can still just pay to a normal pub key hash, and you're not affected by any of that. So the soft forks do vary in how friendly they are. But even then, like, assuming this, the worst thing you can really do with the soft fork is you can filter things out. And I'm aware there is this weird variation of a fork where you filter everything out, and I try to use an analogy that, like, if you're playing chess and you're just moving the knights back and forth, both you and another player are just moving the left knight and the right knight back and forth on the chess. So it looks like you're playing chess, but you're actually like parameterizing some other game, right? You can play anything else. You can play Connect 4 or Risk or whatever. You can play any game if you're just like using these to send bits. So you can like build these like games with, like, nest them all within each other, but ignoring really weird stuff like that. And I would refer to that as what you might call a loud fork, because you're very, or a mean fork. It would be both, actually. I have a graph, but so I don't really have an opportunity to explain it very well right now. But barring this weird stuff, the most you can do is filter the game so that it's no longer possible to like play chess meaningfully. It's no longer possible to use the blockchain. But the hard fork, I think, does open the door to manipulation, and even it also opens the door to maybe threatening people. And so I am concerned about that. I don't think it's necessary to assume that has happened yet, though, because, well, first of all, I think it's really easy to see how people would be sincere. Satoshi's position is a little ambiguous. It's mostly clear that Satoshi was like a very big blocker. The only major point against that is that he himself inserted in July 2010, he himself inserted the 1 megabyte block limit, which established him as unambiguously as someone who wants a 1 megabyte block, at least at some point. And then he said it could be removed in the future, but he did not explain what he meant ever. So that is unfortunate. But he had this vision. It's very bizarre to me, because most of the technically competent people are in favor of small blocks, and most of their reasoning is the same as my reasoning, which is that it keeps the cost of running the full node down, which allows people to use the network. No matter, they can participate as an equal peer on this network. But Satoshi had a different vision, it seems, where everyone was using SPV mode, and only a few people were running full nodes, or what is now called full nodes. And that is kind of surprising to me, that you really have only, it's like all of the really technical people are on one side, and then Satoshi's position is very ambiguous. He had, at various points in time, this vision of Bitcoin that was different, and yet he was the one who himself introduced the 1 megabyte, the infamous 1 megabyte limit. The only reason I bring this up is that there is I understand why certain people want the block size to increase, and I think that's that it's not necessary to assume a conspiracy. It's like, for example, Roger Ver has spent a lot of time explaining to people that you can send money for free or at low cost. He's invested in various businesses, Purse.io, which take advantage of arbitrage in transaction costs. And so you can see how he'd be personally invested in that. I'm not sure about Gavin. That's an interesting question. I know that, and I don't think Roger Ver is funding a lot of stuff, and he's promised to fund a lot of large block stuff in the future. I know that he was not behind the 500,000 donation. It's not necessary to assume. So like certain people, so for example, Brian Armstrong at Coinbase, when you're the administrator of a business, you really only care the business model could be good, but the timing could be bad. So if the timing is bad, that's a big problem for you if you're the CEO, because they're not going to come to you again after you crashed the first plane, and they're not going to give you a second plane. You'll be the guy who screwed up forever. Not forever. And they may sometimes give you a second plane or whatever, but usually it doesn't work that way. Usually they try someone else. They promote from within. So they'll pick some other guy to be the CEO of Coinbase 2 when it launches in 2018. So it's easy for me to imagine people who have raised money and are working in the industry. It's easy for me to imagine them as being desperate as they face various internal pressures. People who want to have them replace the CEO, people who want their job, the investors who are upset about profits or this or that. They make, the people have a business model and they have projections, and it's really embarrassing to miss the projections time after time. I know that, furthermore, I happen to know, or I happen to have perceived that one individual who is a large blocker person is Olivier Janssens. I know that he has some big personal feud with some other people who may have co-founded Blockstream, and so they have like some kind of personal thing. So there's a lot of like stuff that is personal, and based on my own study of human psychology and my own reading, and I actually have an undergraduate degree in social psychology, which is the way that normal people behave in groups, and there's nothing really that unique about, given like how weird this is, like a bunch of people on the internet, they're all forced to use the same network. If we change the network, it affects everyone. So there are some people who are kind of choosing for everyone. There's like a dominance theme. I don't think it's necessary to assume that anything truly untoward has happened, because this is like basically the way people behave when there are enough of them, and they split into two camps. And you're right, one of the important things, Gabriel, is that these people separated into groups a long time ago, and they've slowly been like stewing in their own, they each have their own sides, and the sides are, and one thing is that it's very hard for someone's like high status, for example, Greg Maxwell. It's hard for people to tell him that maybe he's like gone too far, or maybe he shouldn't be doing XYZ, or he shouldn't be commenting on this. Like in my own personal opinion, I don't understand. It's difficult for me to understand why he's even participating on our BTC, given the way he's treated there. I don't know why anyone would encourage that. But it's easy for me to imagine that people would be afraid of criticizing him because he's so important. It's easier. You want to have like a valuable friend, right? So the smarter thing to do. We human beings evolved these kind of political instincts to like make powerful friends and then like stab them in the back at the right time. And it's very sad, but there are a lot of people who are like very important. And all I'm trying to say is there's kind of a recipe here for disastrous political thinking, which is that there are a lot of people who are very well respected, and then it slowly becomes difficult. I think Thamos is another example. No one would want to tell Thamos that he should maybe rethink. Maybe the moderation policy was very well intentioned, but if we're going to splinter off into a second Bitcoin subreddit, like maybe it's time to like just recheck that a little bit. But people would not want to say that because they would themselves be afraid of getting censored on our Bitcoin and losing access to the media and the viewers and the audience that way. But as a result, what this does to you, if you are one of these people, these high status people, is it puts you on this kind of path to your own destruction, because people start treating you differently and you get a less accurate view of the world, right? And then you maybe one day you ask your supporters and you say, I don't know, did I do that right, or did I go too far, or whatever? And they say, no, you did fine, like, because what incentive do they have to? And so it just builds these cycles up, right? Where like groups will split, and then they will do these cycles back and forth, and it's kind of sad to watch. It's like sometimes I call it like the George Lucas effect, where George Lucas was such like unbelievable amounts of praise were just heaped on him from Star Wars, and then he did Episode 1, and everything about Episode 1 was wrong, but no one wanted to like step up and say that George Lucas was doing Star Wars wrong. And so as a result of that, it like ended up like exploding, and it's just smarter. I mean, it's easy for me to imagine, same thing on the large block side, like it's easy for me to imagine that people would not want to criticize Roger Ver for a number of reasons that are all similar. And so I don't think it's really that bad, but you just see it all it takes is a little bit for this like permanent bias to kind of set in. And human beings have very strong biases, and I think it only takes a little bit of seed to like germinate into a giant plant of like just terribleness. And I think we have a lot of terribleness right now, a lot of mistrust, a lot of assuming bad faith, and that's unfortunate but yeah, I don't really think. But I think you may be onto something with Gavin Andresen, because he did visit the CIA, and I don't know why he did that, and he has done some other things that are a little confusing. And I don't know if like
more than one thing. He's done more than one thing that's
right.
confusing.
Yeah, I agree, and that would be sad if true. But I think mostly we don't need to assume anything. I think, but I think we can do a lot of cool stuff with soft forks, and I think we just insist on those. And I think in that way we can protect ourselves from. But yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up, because it's a very important point. How can Bitcoin maintain the protocol if the software engineers are compromised? And I think the only real way is for the users to insist on soft forks. And you can do a lot with a soft fork. You can do, for example, you can do Dr. Adam Beck proposed this extension block, which is a soft fork block size increase. And it always blew my mind, like, why is no one ever talking about this idea? Because it's like, it seems to be like a win-win, right? The miners want the block size increase. They can do it all by themselves. They just do the extension block. And people don't want to do a hard fork, but now it's a soft fork. But there are some objections to extension blocks, and they are annoying. I think sidechains are like strictly better. In fact, I think it's everything an extension block is, but better in a number of ways. But it always got me. I couldn't figure out why people never take the win-win ideas seriously, because I think it's mostly this political instinct that people want to win. They want to show all the women in the audience who's the boss around here. And that's like the instinct that we all evolved to have. And it's not really compatible with commerce or the modern world, but we still have this instinct that's like to compete and win. And I think a lot of people just like hate each other now, and they want to win, that's a hard place to, it's hard to get people to cooperate once you reach that point.
That's what it seems that it's a bit evolving into, is sides, and one side wants to win and things like that. But we have this huge financial incentive to make Bitcoin work, and so I really still think it's going to work itself out, and it kind of is working itself out, right? We have Segwit released, we have other ideas proposed, we have the system is in place, and it's in motion, and it's working. So we'll see if this block size debate will take down Bitcoin, or if it'll just make it stronger. And so far, I believe that it's made it stronger, and more resilient. So we'll see where it goes. So we were going to do one last topic, but we're kind of already at 2 hours. So I know the chat's screaming for us to keep going, but it's getting late. So we're going to probably have to shut it down a bit. But I just wanted to thank you guys so much for joining. Thank you, Paul, so much for coming on the show, man. You have a whole lot of insight, and one would have to watch this show, this particular episode, a bunch of times to get everything that you said. And we really appreciate all the insight that you bring and insider knowledge, and so to speak, and stuff like that. So, because we know that you are, you're an economist, a programmer, and you're in this stuff, creating awesome products. So, really, thank you for being on the show, and thanks my guests so much as well, Gabriel, Daniel. Thank you guys so much for being on the show. We'd like to thank everybody in the chat. Even John Seth was in the show, so we'd like to thank him, and we'll try to get him and Chris at some on the show at some point, and that's going to be fun, I think. So thanks again so much, guys. Let's do the outro. So Paul, where can we find you, please?
I'm Truthcoin on Twitter, and truthcoin.info is my blog, and you can find bitcoinhivemind.com is the site for Bitcoin Hivemind. And honestly, if you spell my last name correctly, you can probably find me on the internet wherever I am.
Yep, and I confused them. I keep confusing you and Ryan Charles. I had a tweet that said that you were the creator of Yours Network and stuff, and I'm like, Paul's probably never going to come on the show again after I do that. So,
I had a great time. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much, Paul. Gabriel, where can we find you, man?
My theory about your confusion there is X and Z. You're just missing out the X and Z. So now I'm going to call you Vortez. That's your new Spanish conquistador name.
Oh man.
Find me on Twitter, guys and girls, and things that are in between, like they say about the First Lady. My Twitter handle, of course, Gabriel Divine.
Awesome. You guys got to check out his blog and his video. Hopefully we'll get another interview soon from the Future Rant. And then, of course, we got Daniel from You and Me BTC. Thanks again for joining us, man. Where can we find you?
Yeah, two easy ones. You, me, and BTC.com, or at You, me, and BTC on Twitter. Those are our best places. We also have, we're on YouTube. We're on World Crypto Net. We're on Liberty.me. We just got SoundCloud, if that's your thing. We're all over the place. So we have a good time show every Thursday, so check us out.
Yeah, for sure. Looks like John Seth is saying in the chat that they got to get you on the show, Daniel. So you guys got to get on Bitcoin Uncensored, man. They love you over there. Should be good stuff. So, all right, guys, thanks so much again for joining us. We're going to bid you a farewell. You can find us again right here in the World Crypto Network YouTube channel every other Monday at 8 p.m. And, of course, you can find me on Twitter at @TheOneVortex. That's where I do all my tweeting about Bitcoin. So thanks again, guys. And until next time, we'll talk to you. We'll talk to you again.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, guys.